Please stop. You're hurting me.
Lena's Campfire Folk Tales.
In a small, lively town, two families lived next to each other. The families of James and Sarah were like best friends. James's mom, Auntie Grace, and Sarah's mom, Auntie Ruth, spent lots of time together, cooking, chatting, and helping each other out. James and Sarah were both 9 years old. They did everything together, playing outside, running around the yard, and making up funny games. They were like brother and sister. One bright afternoon, James told his mom, "Mom, I need a phone to do my homework." At first, Auntie Grace said no because James was still a kid, but since he was her only child, she wanted him to be happy. The next day, she went to the market and asked about phones. The shopkeeper showed her a new phone, the Intel S25 Ultra, which was great for kids and not too expensive. The following Saturday, Auntie Grace came home with a small, shiny box. She called James to the living room and handed him the phone. "James, you've been such a good boy. Here's a phone for you, but you must use it wisely, okay?" she said, smiling. James's eyes grew wide with excitement. "Thank you, Mommy," he shouted, holding the phone in his hands. At first, James just played games and watched cartoons. Sarah sometimes joined him, and they laughed together at funny videos. But one day, while their moms were out, James found a new app on his phone that let him watch all kinds of videos. He scrolled through and saw a picture of a movie that looked bright and exciting. It said it was for people older than 18, but it looked interesting. "What's that, James?" Sarah asked, peeking over his shoulder. "I don't know," James said, grinning. "Let's watch it and find out." They snuck into James's room, locked the door, and started the movie. It was strange, and they didn't really understand it, but it felt like a secret. They promised each other they wouldn't tell anyone. The next weeks went by, and they watched more and more movies on James's phone. They would sneak around when their moms weren't home, locking the door and keeping it all a secret. But soon, things started to change. They didn't play outside as much, and they became quieter. They didn't want their parents to know what they were doing. One day, Auntie Grace came home early. The house was unusually quiet, and she heard voices from James's room. She knocked on the door. "James." "Sarah," she called. James quickly turned off the phone, but it was too late. Auntie Grace had already become suspicious. When James opened the door, she saw the phone on the bed. She picked it up and looked through the history. Her face went pale. "What is this?" she asked, her voice full of shock and disappointment. Sarah started crying. Word quickly spread to Auntie Ruth, and soon both families were sitting down for a serious talk. James and Sarah sat quietly as their moms discussed what had happened. "Why didn't we notice this before?" Auntie Ruth asked. "These children are too young to be watching such things." Instead of taking the phone away, both mothers scolded James and Sarah. They told them they should never do that again and handed the phone back to James. James and Sarah were relieved. They hadn't lost the phone, but they promised to be more careful. They decided to keep watching the movies, but now they had to be sneakier. They figured out how to leave the door open just a little, so no one would notice. They even set an alarm on James's phone to remind them when to stop before their moms came home. Over time, the two children grew bolder. They discovered new apps and websites with similar rated 18 content. Their curiosity deepened, and they started talking about the things they didn't fully understand from the movies. These children will engage in erotic discipline that were not for children. By this time, the thoughts of practicing what they had seen on their phones had come to their mind. But the only thing hindering these children now is the location to practice what they had been seeing. What do you think they mean by those things they were doing? Sarah asked one day, her voice low. "I don't know," James replied, frowning in thought. "But I think we could try it and see." Sarah hesitated. "What if it's dangerous? What if Mummy catches us?" "It's just pretending," James said confidently. "No one will know." Sarah nodded, still unsure but unwilling to say no to her best friend. So they gathered the courage and decided to try what they had seen on TV. One afternoon, While both their mothers were shopping, James and Sarah decided it was time to put their plan into action. But this time they planned to do it in the bathroom, so if they got caught they could pretend as if they were taking their bath together. They closed the door halfway as usual and set their alarm. James had found a scene in one of the videos that he thought they could practice, and he explained it to Sarah. Sarah looked nervous but went along with it. She trusted James and her curiosity outweighed her hesitation. "Are you sure this is okay?" she whispered. "It's just us," James reassured her. "No one will find out." So they were both inside the bathroom and removed their cloths, and then James asked Sarah to bend over. Immediately Sarah bent over and asked James to put it in, and as they were about to act out the scene they had saw in the movies they had watched, they heard a sudden noise from the living room. Both children froze. Their mothers had returned earlier than expected, carrying shopping bags and chatting loudly. "James, Sarah, where are you?" Auntie Grace's voice rang out. Panicking, James and Sarah scrambled to return the phone to its hiding spot, but it was too late. Auntie Ruth walked into the room, stopping dead in her tracks when she saw the two children without cloths. She was in shock. "What are you two doing?" she asked sharply, her eyes narrowing as she noticed their guilty faces and the phone lying on the bed. Before they could respond, Auntie Grace appeared behind her. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the phone, the children's nervous expressions, and the tension in the air. "Give me that phone," she demanded, snatching it up. As the mothers scrolled through the phone's history, their faces darkened with shock and anger. The inappropriate videos were still there, along with new ones that were even worse. "What is this?" Auntie Ruth exclaimed, holding up the phone. Immediately, she had a heart attack and fainted. She was rushed to the hospital. James and Sarah sat on the bathroom sink, trembling. They knew there was no escape this time. "We trusted you," Auntie Grace said, her voice shaking with emotion. "And this is what you've been doing behind our backs?" They spent time in the hospital together with Sarah's mom who had fainted from shock. The doctor tried all they could to revive her. But unfortunately, Sarah's mom passed away due to cardiac arrest. This time, James' mom didn't stop at scolding. The two families called for a meeting with the local pastor and a counselor. The elders in the community were also informed, and the gravity of the situation was laid bare. James's phone was confiscated permanently, and both children were banned from spending unsupervised time together. James's mom also made a decision to monitor their own use of technology, realizing that their carelessness and lack of vigilance had allowed the situation to spiral out of control. Then Sarah moved in with James's mom, since she no longer had a mother. Over the following months, James and Sarah were enrolled in after-school activities to keep them occupied. They attended moral and ethical classes at their church, where they learned about the importance of guarding their minds and hearts. Though it was a slow process, the two children began to understand the dangers of their actions. Their parents became more involved in their lives, creating a structured environment where curiosity could be guided in the right direction. This story reminds us that being curious is normal, but if we don't control it, it can lead to bad things. It also shows how important it is for parents to help guide their children and make sure they grow up with good values. In the end, James and Sarah learned important lessons about responsibility and trust, and their families became stronger by working together to fix their mistakes. The lesson from this story is that parents should stay involved in their children's lives, helping them make good choices. Children also need to listen to their parents, follow the rules, and ask for advice from those who care about them. If you enjoy this story, please kindly like and subscribe for more interesting stories. Thank you so much, and I don't take your support for granted.